Thank you, Marcella. Thank you so much for that. It's really, really wonderful telling of that story. I'm really excited to be with you. I think that we find ourselves in a particular moment, don't we? And so I suspect maybe you give your board a little bit of credit for their impeccable timing, having this be the topic for your February meeting. I talk about this topic, I think, a little bit differently than a lot of other people do. And so hopefully we'll pull some things today that we can use, both in how we engage with one another. I'm talking to you all as speakers today, but I'm also talking to you as community members, as colleagues, as people who can carry this message forward in a way that perhaps will make a difference in this particular moment that we find ourselves in today. Okay? So, we're actually going to interact some too, so I hope everybody's ready to interact. I saw a lot of people were ready for pictures, and that's terrific because social media is very important. Hopefully you're also ready to actually talk to one another a little bit during this time. So because we're going to do something that I think that'll be brief but interesting to start off. And then I believe I'm going to come back after the break. And when I come back after the break, I'm going to show you how to do something that maybe you all will be able to take into your own speaking engagements, where appropriate. Okay? All right, so what do we, these things never work when they always work prior, they never work during. Yeah, it was, and then I touched it. That's how it works.
It's that magnetic personality.
I guess, yeah. Do-do-do.
Okay, keep going.
All right, if you go to, just click it on to the next one. Just really quick, what do we want to accomplish today? One, as I shared, we're going to talk about identity. And identity is a really important step, I think a foundational step to understanding what belonging looks like, what psychological safety looks like. So identity is a really important step to that. I told you we'd do an exercise, and then also I'm going to explain to you a little bit of the stakes, all right? So Marcella gets always a little emotional in a beautiful way as she tells our story. I get emotional as I start to talk about what is at stake if we get these things wrong. So you all know this stuff. You're living it, right? We're increasingly segregating ourselves in our communities. There was a period of about 30, 40 years where we were integrating our communities, our neighborhoods. If you look across the country now, there's been kind of retreatment there, people moving back into isolated communities. And that's not good for us. Our culture is more antagonistic. Before I go through all these, I've started doing some version of this slide when I do some of my talks, probably in 2018. And it's interesting, over the course of time I've been doing that, sometimes I'll be doing it during a period in the United States where people look at it and they're like, this guy's dramatic. Like, really? Like, is it really that serious? And other times, like now, when I put this up there, you're like, can we skip to the next slide? We know this already. Right? Our families are being undermined, right? Some of the things that are happening in our society are undermining our family relationships right now. We're less likely to help one another, stress and anxiety levels, specific to racial antagonism. There's some studies that show that racial antagonism harms the physical health not only of the person who is committing the racial antagonism, who is receiving it, but also the person who's committing it. Right? They harm the physical health of both sides. And then violence is increasing. Right? This is what we're seeing in our society. So I want to compel you a little bit with this. And this has kind of become my anchor in a lot of ways as I do this work. I had the opportunity to work with a woman by the name of Samar Ali, who started an organization called Millions of Conversations. She's worked in both Democratic and Republican administrations. Okay? And when I first was introduced to her, she told me what they do is they travel to parts of the world that are in conflict, where communities are struggling with some kind of issue, usually around difference, and they're in conflict, and where perhaps there's even some violence that is either broken out or they're there to prevent violence from happening. And what she told me was, starting in 2020, they started spending a lot more of their time in the United States because they see some of the beginnings, some of the early indications of things happening here that they've seen in other countries where significant violence is broken out. And what she told me was this, what you see here. She said there's a common thread, there's a common theme, and it begins with labeling. Right? Labeling of the other. And she said what happens is if you allow yourself to label the other, you start down this path. Right? And you don't know if you can get off of this path before it ends with violence. She says they see that all over the world. And so I'm going to be real with you. Do I label people? Yeah. Of course. Right? You're on the road, and I live in Nashville, and in Nashville there's a lot of people who moved from LA. And so we are not always nice to them. And I'm driving down the road, and I see, and someone cuts me off in traffic, and I look at the license plate that says California on it, and I'm like, see those LA people? This is the problem. This is the problem. They take their bad driving to, look, maybe it was just a rental car. People. It was somebody that was just renting a car. The license plate does not tell me whether they're from LA or not. But I took that leap. We as humans tend to do that. Okay? And so that's one of the things that we have to guard against. I'll tell you, you all have seen some of those, we were talking about documentaries a lot today, but you've seen some of those documentaries they'll do about different acts of violence that have happened and really bad stuff that's happened over the world in the United States. And usually they'll interview some of the family of the person who was participating in it. You've seen that before? And they interview the family. And when they interview the family, there's kind of a common thread, right? The thread is, I don't know why this happened. He was never like this. He was never a person. He didn't care about politics at all. We can't, for the life of ourselves, figure out how we got here. This is how we got here. Labeling is how it starts, right? And you don't know. We think we can stop here, and that's the whole point. We head down this path, which can end in violence. So that's my first challenge to you as it relates to the work we all do and who we are in our communities is we cannot label other people. And what we have to have is that awareness, right? It's going to happen, but when you're aware of it, you got to step in and say, right, stop it. Don't allow yourself to do that. And that's one of the things that I do when I have that happen to me, when I have that tendency to try to label other people. Okay? So let's talk about identity. So there's chosen identity. I do this, a version of this for high school kids. I do a version of it for college kids. And high school and college kids, this is where they're like, okay, keep going. We know this already. I found that with respect to not knowing anyone's age in the room, but I'm just looking at you, I'm going to make an assumption that you're past your college years, your undergraduate years, and anyway, you're older than 22. And so, some of you are right on the cusp. You're 23. It's a lot of 23-year-olds, but not very 22-year-olds. So, right. So there's chosen identity. College students tend to know this already because they're experiencing it within their college process. There's chosen identity, which is that part of yourself that you choose. It's who I am. Who am I? How do I see myself? Okay, and then we got applied identity. That's what society puts on you. Now that's where the problem starts, right? Because often what society puts on you, how you see yourself, are not the same. Now, I want you to yell these out to me. I want you and I like to just level set here. I know you know this, but I always have to level set. Yell out to me what some examples are of some different types of identities that we encounter. People, who are some of the people that end up in our audiences, for instance? What are some of the identity markers of those folks? So just name out some categories for me. Speakers, yep.
Business professionals.
Give me business professionals,
Students.
yep. Your students.
Managers.
Talk about their identity. What might some of their identities be?
Women.
It could be women, right? It could be women.
Others.
It could be moms. Yep.
Disability.
It could be someone with a physical disability or neurological difference.
Architects.
It could be, what was that?
Architects.
Architects for you. You call out professional identifications.
Engineers.
It could be engineers, like I am.
Athletes.
Introverts, athletes, yep. Leaders.
Elderly.
Yep. Elderly, yep. All these are great. So what I was calling out, what we were talking about was some different types of what we call social identities. Right? So social identities we encounter. So country of origin. No one said that. Not everyone was born in the United States. Right? Generation, someone said elderly. You're calling out different generational differences. Sexual orientation, gender identity. Family status, I think of people who said mom, right? You called out someone's family status when you said mom. Okay? So all these are part of what we consider to be identity. Religion and some other ones in there as well. All right? So I want you to think for a second how you define yourself. Right? What parts of your identity are most important to you? Okay? What parts of your identity are most important to you? Now, again, my students for me would be like, they would be doing this right now. My college students would be doing this, right? They thought about this already. My suspicion is that you have not thought about this before. She's oh yeah. Okay. So I want you to say, what are the three most important parts of your identity? I'm gonna put you in pairs of two, where you can talk about this and get to know each other through this. What are the three most important parts of your identity? How would you rank them? Right? Now, my request to you is, sometimes I do this. And I have somebody say, well, my number one is that I'm super smart. That's my number one. I'm always like, are you?
Okay, I won't take that one.
So, all that to say, you don't mind, I'm going to put you in a little bit of a box and focus on social identities, right? And this isn't every social identity on earth either, right? This is just, there are other social identities that are not on here, but let's stick with these social identities for the purpose of this exercise, okay? And then I want you share with your partner your name, place where you're born, your three identities, and why you chose your three. Now, why you chose your three is very important. I'm going to give you mine. Why did I choose my three? So my three would be, number one is my Catholic faith. Number two for me is my race, my ethnicity. Number three for me is my background as an engineer. Because I try to apply logic to every situation. In a lot of situations where logic does not apply, and I still try to stuff logic into it, force it into that. And my story starts for me from my family background. So my grandmother was born in a little town called Senatobia, Mississippi. I'm going to guess you've never probably heard of Senatobia, Mississippi. You ever have to be in Memphis, you go south, Senatobia will hit it. Like there'll be a McDonald's, you know it's there and you pass it. My grandmother, though, was born during the Jim Crow era. Okay? And she's told me many stories of what it was like for her growing up in Senatobia. She said that her family, it was dirt roads back in those days. Our family, we were sharecroppers. So we were very, very poor. And my grandmother said, she'd tell me, like, she'd be walking down the street, her family, and a white family would come in their way, and they were expected to step off to the side of the road and let the white family pass before they could step back onto the road. She was not educated. She had about a 5th grade education, right? So not much education. She got sick of living in that environment, and she moved to Detroit. When she moved to Detroit, when she was about 17, 18 years old, she met my grandfather. And when she met my grandfather, they fell in love, started having children. Right? My grandmother was a very astute woman, very astute. And so she found out that the best schools in Detroit at that time were the parochial schools, the Catholic schools. She also heard a rumor that if you were Catholic, your kids could go to those schools either free or at a deep discount. Now, my grandmother was a Southern Baptist. Now, there's her version of the story and there's a real story. Her version of the story is one day she was walking by a Catholic church and this bright light and she couldn't see and she followed her heart and walked into this place and that was how she became Catholic. Those of us who know better know she wanted her kids to go to that school cheap. But I remember growing up, my grandmother being in church with me, and she'd be elbowing me and kicking me in the shin like all kids who were falling asleep at church and stuff. All grandparents do that. My grandmother is not with us anymore, but it's when I'm in church I feel most connected to her. When I'm in church I feel most connected, which is why that's so important to me. And if you consider for a moment, here was a woman that had very little education, who put all that emphasis on education. And as a result of that, here I am in front of you now. Her decisions. Generations ago, she made those decisions, and that's why I am. I suspect some of you have stories that are not so different from that. So, what do we do? I'm going to give you, each person, try to keep it to about 2 minutes apiece, right? Why you chose the three, what your three are, why you chose them, where you're from. Let's do that, and get in the pairs of 2 to do this, okay? If there's someone that ends up in 3, that's fine, but try to stay in 2. Here we go here. Awesome. Okay. So, we share these social identities just so that you would have an understanding that everybody in this room is part of this conversation. Do I get that? You look here, all of us can find ourselves somewhere on this page. And so this is really about everyone. Okay? Did anyone have the exact same top 3? Probably some similarities. If you have the same top 3, I'd ask you, were they in the same order? right? Because we create challenges, we create conflict around difference based on how we see our identity. Right? We create challenges and conflicts based on how we see our identity. We make assumptions about how other people see their identity based on how we see our own. Okay? What do I mean by that? I'll give you an example. Some years ago, I was asked to coach a woman at a company. She was well liked and she was a good employee, but she was creating issues, conflicts around difference, and so they wanted me to talk to her. And so I started off on our call. We did exactly what you all just did. We're trying to make that connection. Well, it turns out that her number one identity was her Christian faith. And I said, okay, good. That's a good starting point for us to have a good coaching. Okay? And I went through and I shared to the T what I shared with you all. And then after sharing it, she said, well, Robert, I'm so glad you shared that. She said, I don't see color. She said, I don't see color, and I'm glad you shared that. And that's just, I think color is just, it gets in the way. It just causes issues, and it's just, she said, we're all God's children, and it doesn't matter, and we shouldn't be talking about color or race. And I was like, okay, because I kind of just told you that was my number 2 thing, and you just telling me. And so she got defensive. She's like, well, see, that's what I mean, and people are always, this is why it causes all these problems. So I said, okay, let's try this. So let's try this. I said, I want you to pretend for a moment that my race, my religion was not my number one identity. Let's pretend that wasn't for a moment. She said, okay. And I said, what if I told you, you know what? Remember, her number 1 was her Christian faith. I said, what if I told you, I don't see religion. I don't see faith. I don't see religion. I don't know why we're talking about it. Religion has just started wars for centuries, and we shouldn't, so we're all God's children. Why are we even bringing religion up in our conversation? She got super defensive. She said, you know what? She said, she told me, I feel like as a Christian in our society, I can't be myself. She said, I don't think I can bring my whole self to work as a Christian. I feel like I have to hide my faith. That's what she said. And so I told her, I said, well, look, we can't have this both ways. It can't be when it's something important to your identity, we need to celebrate it and honor it, and you get to be yourself. But when it's something that's important to my identity, why are we bringing that up? That shouldn't be talked about at work. Everybody get that? Yeah. And so why do we create those conflicts around identity? Why does it happen? It's because we think we see the world the way it is, when in fact we see the world the way we are. We think we see the world the way it is, when in fact we see the world the way we are. Real quick, we got a couple of minutes here. Anybody want to weigh in on what they think that means to them? What do you think Stephen R. Covey's saying?
I think what he's saying is that we are so steeped in our own lenses that sometimes it's hard to be objective and to come out of that. So it's an absolute, this is the way it is. Or is it? Or is it more because I am Casey that I see it that way?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think he's saying.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, go ahead. That's great.
I'll use a Stephen Covey word, which is we see it through our paradigm. So we see it through our emotions, experiences, our struggles, and basically our lived experience.
Our lived experience, yeah. What has a big impact on those, how you see the world? The lens is perfect. What has a big impact on that? Traumas?
Your life experience.
Be more specific.
Your personal story, your individual story, how you got to be where you are today.
That's right. Yell out some other ones. That's
Challenges.
all. Challenges.
Yes.
She said upbringing. Who raised you? And what they say, right? And that also sometimes is trauma too. Right? Right? What else? Your education, culture, community environment, society.
Skin color.
Okay, there's a couple I want to pull out from you.
Economic status.
Yeah, there's a couple I want to pull out from you. One is where you've traveled, right? And media. Especially social media, because now with social media we have the ability to create these ecosystems for ourselves where we can get fed, the algorithm is going to feed us more information that just supports what we already believe. Go ahead.
And we also not have the aspect of we pretty much see in others what we see in ourselves.
Mhm.
We look for that connection.
Yeah, that's right. That's a great point. That's a great point. Yeah. And that's where, thank you, good segue, that's where the source of the biases come from. Right? So these ways in which we see the world, and these biases develop from that, that's where it comes from. There is this thing, you all seem to understand it, but I feel compelled anytime I speak to someone on this topic, and it's this thing around bias. Because somehow our society, not I'm using we in a particular way, our society has been teaching people that we're wrong, that biases are not, that humans don't have biases, that it's wrong to say that a person has a bias. And if you listen when people suggest that, what they're conflating is, there are some people that believe when you say, yeah, you have a bias, they'll come back and say things, I've done had this happen. I'll say in a group like this that we all have biases, and afterwards they'll say, Robert said that I'm racist. I can't, and I'm like, whoa, wait. How do we get there? Humans are supposed to have biases. That is how we have survived as a species, right? I always tell people, I'll use this example just to be funny. Hopefully the joke lands. Let's go way back in history. When we were hunter-gatherers, I don't know how long, some of you should know how long ago, I don't know how as in millions, I lose track.
When I was young.
And we all got our spears. We got our spears. And we hear what sounds like a hungry lion closing in on us. What did all of the ancestors, the people in this room, do when they heard the hungry lion roaring? We run. We are the descendants of the people that ran. Right? Right? The people that didn't know, and let me tell you what they didn't say. They didn't say, well, you know, that Robert guy told us that people don't have a bias and every lion's not a bad lion and get to know the lion first. No, we ran. Okay? If I get that, you're supposed to have these biases. And by the way, as we know, there are other types of biases. There's like time bias, there's confirmation bias, there's all different types of biases that humans exhibit. And so that's a normal condition. What we have to do is help learn for our conscious self to be more aware of what our unconscious self is doing. I'm going to say that one again. We're trying to get our conscious self to be more aware of what our unconscious self is doing. And that's how bias is connected to what we talked about a few minutes ago, right? Our conscious, that awareness of labeling other people, right? The key, you're going to do it. The key is that voice in your head to stop you from doing it. And what's neat about that is once that voice starts, it always works. But if it hasn't started, it's not working, okay? So let's remember that. We're going to come back to that after the break. So I want to share with you what we call these barriers to belonging. Right? I call them barriers to belonging. And I'll work through what they are. So one of them is what we call micro insults. So these are things that prevent belonging in a number of different mediums. So one of them could be speeches that you're giving to people, right? And the way that we communicate and talk with people. It could be in your community. These are things that prevent people from feeling like they're welcome or they belong, like they're valued. Okay? So one of them is these micro insults. Verbal or nonverbal communication implies demeaning, rude, or insensitive sentiments based on someone's identity. Oftentimes, they lack harmful intent, but convey hidden insults or judgments. And that's intent versus impact. Right? If we have a little more time, I may describe that more fully. Micro invalidations. This one I like because this is the one where someone says, well, you know, when I first, and I won't use you guys as an example because I don't want to give you the impression that I sense this at all. Let's use this example. At your workplace, and someone says, you know, when I first started working here, people would make comments and stuff. I did a lot of acronyms, and I didn't really feel like I really fit in here with the things that they were saying. And the invalidation is, oh, we always talk like that around here. I mean, you're going to work here. You got to get used to that kind of thing. That's just how we are. It's just what we do. Right? You just invalidated my experience. Right? I don't feel like I'm valued here because you just invalidated my experience. Right? Oh, you know, it's just everybody around here jokes. Oh, my other favorite one. I used to work in a lot of manufacturing plants, and the one out here there was, you should have saw how it used to be around here. It was way worse for you guys. I mean, it was terrible. So in other words, I should put up with what I'm experiencing because it's better than it was 30 years ago. Right? What's up with that? Okay, and then micro assaults. And you know, these are called micro assaults, but they don't feel micro at all. And these are where the use of derogatory symbols in particular. And so what that is there is a symbol of some kind that has a derogatory meaning to certain people. You know that. And yet you're still the bumper sticker on the car, the flag at work, or the comment you know that this is going to hurt people, but you're still doing it because it means something to you, right? Because it means something to you. That's a micro assault. And then lastly, micro inequities. This is the freeze out. This one's the freeze out. So that's, in our setting where we intentionally disregard certain people, or, certainly in a setting, in a business setting, where I just don't work with this particular person because they're different and I don't want them to shine at all, and so I go out of my way to not include them, right? And that, again, makes people feel like they're not valued. I want to talk impact versus intent. So what we talk about is calling someone in versus calling them out. Calling in versus calling out. Okay. Now calling in. Let me give you an example I'll talk about it this way. Let's say that let's say that I had some food from lunch. Still, it's been over an hour since lunch ended. I think an hour and a half. Let's say I still had some food from lunch stuck on my teeth. Okay. And Pat, you were the one of all these people in here to finally say, Robert, you have some food stuck on your teeth, right? And so here's my question. Am I going to, that's what a call-in looks like. My response to Pat going to be, Pat, how dare you accuse me of having food stuck on my teeth? I'm going to march out of here. I'm going to find the president, and we're going to make sure that you're on probation. What if there's probation? I don't know what it is. From NSA, New York City, right? I'm going to make sure that you're not welcome here anymore, right? Who does that? Nobody. Here's how it really looks. Oh my gosh, I couldn't take it. I'm going to get this on you. Why did nobody say anything? Right? That would be my response. Pat helped me. A call-in is a help to you. The problem is a call-in feels bad, doesn't it? It feels like they're accusing you of not being a good person. But if you look at it that way, that they're trying to help you, right, that makes it effective. So we like to call people in versus calling them out. And then specific to intent versus impact, sometimes when we call in, we focus a lot of our attention on intent. So I didn't mean it to come off that way. I didn't mean it to say it that way. I was saying, why are you freaking out like this? I didn't mean it. That's not what I intended. And it's like, well, I mean, people have to be thicker skinned. I mean, come on, you gotta be thicker. You know I didn't mean. You know me. You know I didn't mean that. I don't make such a big issue out of that, right? You're focused on intent versus impact. So I'll give you another these are like little hacks that you can use for this, for your own brain. So let's say that I happen to walk too far over here and Marcella's leg is out and I trip over her leg and fall and roll down the aisleway all the way to the cameraman. Okay? It's a little dramatic, I'm sure. Dramatic. Right? Now, what is Marcella's response when she sees me rolling over there? What is her response to me? It's probably bad, he said.
Why didn't you look where you're going?
Bad, he said. That's my point. That's my point. Are most people, not named Marcella, going to say, come on, Rob, that's dramatic, man. My leg was barely even out there. How did you even fall? Like, oh, come on. No, you're fine. You're okay. Don't act right. Would she do that? Or would most people say, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I didn't know my leg was out. Are you okay? Do you need anything? We would try to do whatever we can to help the person, make sure they're okay. Right? That's intent versus impact. Her intent was not to make me trip, but she responded to the impact of it. Right? She responded to the impact of it. And so when we have that call in, that's really important that we think about the impact and address the impact of what happened. Worry about the intent later. There'll be a moment to worry about intent. She'll eventually say, I'm so sorry, I didn't know I shouldn't have my leg out, but I definitely didn't mean to hurt you. I'm sorry, right? She's going to address that later. But when we have a call in, as humans, we tend to want to focus on the intent. I didn't mean to do that. So why is all the focus on this other stuff, right? I need you all to affirm that I'm still a good person in the group. That's what we're looking for. Affirm me that I'm still a good person. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we talked about the different experiences and the different journeys. Each of us come to a given point, and I think one person mentioned something like trauma.
Yeah.
If we looked at this from a perspective of if somebody has grown up with a traumatic background, with lots of things going on, that it almost causes them or allows them to feel that something's coming my way. You start ducking because you're expecting another hit to be coming. In that sense, if another individual, this person has just met, says something that is received as a punch that's coming, that may not actually be becoming, somebody may be raising their hand to like, hey, high five, but somebody's seeing that and coming as a slap coming down to them. So how do you assess whether, say, that micro insult is actually an insult, but it is being received because somebody's trauma that they're bringing to the interaction?
Yeah, thank you for that word. It's triggering them in some way, which everyone in this room has something that triggers them.
Yes.
We all do. Again, respond, address the impact. Respond, address the impact. And that just, look, you know you didn't mean to trip him. You know you weren't trying to hit him when you put your high five. But we have to, as humans, we need everybody to know that. We need everybody to, okay, everybody good? You still like me? Everybody still likes me. I didn't mean to hit him. I was just high-fiving. But we're looking for that affirmation. Why you need that? You know you didn't mean to hit and hurt anybody. That's not who you are. You don't need everybody in the room to affirm you. Address this person that's in pain, right? And what we're going to do after we come back is I'm going to do a tool that allows you to maybe to get some of that stuff out, right? So that maybe you're more aware of some of these things going in. You started it already, right, when you did identity, because you got to know one another a little bit. Some of you have known each other for a while, and you just shared stuff when we did identity that you've never heard before, right? And weren't some of you thinking, how did I not know that about you? Like, how did that never come up in our conversation, right? So that storytelling that took place is a beginning step to it, but address the impact. So I'm stretching you, right? Because we don't want to address impact. We want people to say that we're good, right? Address the impact. Right? The good, it'll come around. You're going to be fine. They know. First of all, no one thinks Marcella stood out to trip me. No one thinks that anyway. Right? She needs us to know that she didn't try to trip me. And we're all like, we know that. You wouldn't try to. Why would you try, right? So, but we're still looking for that, and that's one of those things that we got to step back from. Okay?
She wanted you to fall for her.
Okay, so let me talk about. So let me talk about belonging. What is belonging? We've got 20 seconds left before we take our break. Psychological. What this is basically saying is humans want to belong. Right? Why are all of you here? Community connection. You want to belong. So you make that kind of your goal, your star, right, that we're all moving towards, this belonging. You build everything around that. It starts to answer some of the other questions we have about how we treat one another, how we respect one another, right? Because we want to belong. You start there. It's like, oh, how do we create and sustain that sense of belonging for people who desire it? Okay? Let's take our break, I guess.
And I'm sure there's that special someone in your life, yourself. So therefore, Laura from Scandinavia House has told us that we can go downstairs and shop for 10% off as long as we tell them we're from NSA. And she said, happy Valentine's Day. All right, and I'm going to hand the microphone back over to Robert for part 2.
Am I working? Is this working?
Yeah, you're good.
Awesome. Okay. So, just to warn you, the next thing we're going to do together, you're going to be in groups of 3. So you have to find 3 people to be in groups of. So you can, and this gets tricky, so I'm going to let you do it because it's too complicated for me to try to fix it. But you're going to add people from the other little groups that were. But no, I just want to put that in your head so you're aware of it. What's that? They're the other, right? It's those people over there. I don't want to be part of their group. No. So what is psychological safety? It's a shared belief held by members of the group that group is a safe place for taking risks. Okay? It's a climate characterized by interpersonal trust, mutual respect, when people are comfortable being themselves. And so you want to create a psychologically safe environment, and there's so much that comes
from it, and there's so much you lose and you don't have it. Right? What comes from it, if I feel psychologically, I mean, I could give you an example. I'll use one that's coming to mind now, is working, and it's a client I have, one of our clients, that they're putting an emphasis on psychological safety over the course of the next year. And we were talking about like why. They said, well, why? It's a lot of reasons. But they said that one of the big things was this company has a number of manufacturing plants. And someone got killed in the line of work at their plant. And they asked themselves, they did the interviews, tried to understand, how does this happen? And overwhelmingly people said, well, that could have been prevented. That could have been, someone should have said this, or someone should have said that, or someone should have said this. All right, so this is physical safety and how psychological safety. So why didn't they speak up? Maybe because they didn't feel like they'd be heard. Maybe they didn't feel like they'd be valued. Maybe they felt like if they said something, they'd get yelled at. Maybe those barriers to belonging were factors as well. Right? And so that's like physical safety. And there's all kinds of other places we could go with respect to the contributions we bring to the work we do. But physical safety and psychological safety are intertwined and critically important. The exercise we're going to do, I'm going to share it, and then you're going to spend like 15 minutes or so just doing this yourself. So this process is one that helps us build trust. It really helps us get to the heart of the matter. And I'm going to share with you the communication agreement that goes with it so that you'll understand like how this creates this trust. And I think for some of you in the work that you do, in the talks that you give, you might want to try using this. I think this might be effective for some of the work that you all are doing. Okay? The narrative disruption, the shared understanding, I think is really key to this because there's some listening that happens as a result of this agreement. So I'm going to read through this in detail for you before you start. We will speak for ourselves and allow others to speak for themselves with no pressure to represent or explain a whole group. We will not criticize the views of others or attempt to persuade them. We will listen with resilience, hanging in when something is hard to hear. That's something that we as a society need some extra. That's a muscle we need to exercise. Hanging in when something's hard to hear. Hanging in when somebody says something that you don't agree with. Right? I think about us with lunch yesterday with Marcel and your son. He said some things that maybe we weren't totally loud, but we both sat and listened and reflected. We're like, he's kind of right on some of the stuff. Right? It's just with three people that care about one another, but hanging in and sitting with it for a moment before we jump to which side of the debate we're going to be on, is what we tend to do. 4 and 5, we will share airtime and participate within the suggested time frames. We will not interrupt except to indicate that we cannot or did not hear the speaker. This is the magic. So I'm going to give you the questions in a moment. There's 3 questions. And those 3 questions have a time next to it. That's a recommended time for you to speak. Okay? While you're speaking, no one will interrupt you. Well, that's the magic, right? Because what we find is that if you can speak for a couple of minutes even and know that you're not going to get interrupted, everybody else just sits back and listens. Because I don't have to figure out what my response, my comeback is going to be. Okay? Now, I want to warn you as we do this, some of you are going to be tempted, you're going to each have a turn, and some of you will be tempted in between speakers to weigh into what someone just said. Not allowed. You have to wait till your turn. Now, during your turn, if you want to spend some of your time weighing into what somebody else said, go right ahead. We find is given that choice, people are like, no, I want to say what I want to say. I don't want to react to what you said. Okay? And then again, you will not interrupt. And then lastly, with Pastor now, you might just not be in the headspace right now for one of these questions. And that's fine. It's pass or Pastor now. Sometimes people pass because something's been said right before them and they want to think about it a little bit before they respond. That's okay. What we hear in confidence, we will not confront one another about circle comments. Go hard against ideas, ideologies, institutions. Don't harm or attack individuals. Right? And that's a tough one, right? We're not going to call out any individuals. And I suspect there's some individuals that we might be tempted to call out. Won't name them. We won't call out individuals. Attack institutions, right? Or ideologies. And lastly, personal electronic devices. That just means we're not recording. Now, someone's going to be a timekeeper. I'm going to show you this and then the questions. One person in each group will be the timekeeper. You probably use your phone for that. One person in a group will read the question each time, and the other person is the selector. The other person determines who goes next. The selector makes sure the same person is not going first or last each time, so it's fair. Okay, and then someone will read it out loud so everybody can hear it, and then the last other person will keep the time. Okay? And it's okay to go over a little bit, everybody. I know some of you are going to be like, good, said 2 minutes. It's okay. A couple seconds over is fine. Like, not trying to create conflict over that. I know I didn't want to look at certain people, but okay. Here are the questions. First, please share your name where you currently reside. We heard where you're from now. Where do you currently reside? How have some of the politically divisive issues, intolerance? Yes. I was reading it fast, get through it, but how have some of the politically divisive issues, intolerance, hatred, or violence in the larger community impacted you personally over the last year? What are you currently most challenged with as a speaker or community member when it comes to creating psychologically safe environments? And lastly, what can we do as speakers to encourage more belonging in the spaces we create? If there's time left, and there could be a little bit of time left, if there's time left, that's open time. During open time, you don't have to play by these rules anymore, right? So you can cut each other off and talk over each other all you want during open time. We give you this question if you get to open time. Please share what success around building a more psychologically safe NSA NYC might look like. Okay? Everybody got it? So I'm going to leave these questions up. You want to get into groups of 3. And remember those roles, a timekeeper, a reader, and a person that selects who goes next. And the next 15 minutes or so is all yours. Okay, so we'll start to wrap up. So hopefully you had a good experience with that activity. Probably had some meaningful conversation. Which is fine. I'm not for everybody either. Right? So hopefully you're able to do that, and you can see you kind of learn how to do this tool. So it's something that you can use. I have some clients that have come to me and said, kind of sheepishly, they've said, we continued using that tool after you left. I'm like, okay. And they kind of look at me kind of odd. Like, yeah, so we've been having trouble in our kitchen with people not respecting the refrigerator. And so we got some questions together, we pulled people together, and now we understand why that's happening. So I'm like, great, that's a great use for it. So you can use it on things that are not necessarily specific to what our topic was today. Okay? So I want to talk about kind of our path forward as we start to wrap up. And to do so, I want to talk a little bit about reconciliation. Okay? And to do that, I want to share with you an experience that I had in South Africa. So who's been in South Africa? I'm sure that, okay, so we have a couple people that have been. Great. So some years ago when I was in graduate school, I had a chance to go to South Africa. About 30 of us that went on this trip. And we got to visit Robben Island, which is the island prison that Nelson Mandela was held in for 29 years. And so we as a group, we walked around, they gave us a tour. It was a black gentleman, older black gentleman, older white gentleman who took us on this tour, and they walked us through. And while we were there, we saw the rock quarry where those men were forced labor every day. And, the chipping at rocks in the rock quarry, it was not for any purpose. Right? It was just, they were just doing that to make sure that they felt that their lives were worthless, is what that was all about. We got to see Nelson Mandela's cell. And I swear to you, the cell was it was tiny cell that they held him in. It really, really hit us to see that. Well, I felt, the whole time on the tour, I felt like something was just off. You ever just feel like something's just off? And I got up the nerve to ask the 2 tour guides. I asked them, I said, if you don't mind me asking, how do you all know each other? And they said, well, you're jumping a little bit ahead in the tour, but we'll explain how we know each other. And the white guy said, yeah, I was one of the guards on this cell block for about a decade. And the black guy said, yeah, I was one of his prisoners on the cell block for a decade. And we couldn't believe it. We were stunned, like, how is that even remotely possible? The white guy, he said, the reason I come back here to do this, he said, I can never make up for what we did to people. I can never make up for that. But he said, I do this to teach young people like you not to make the mistakes that we made. And so I force myself back here every day for that. The black guy, he said, same, I'd come back to teach And he said, you can't imagine how difficult it is for me every day to return to this place. But he said, I do it also as an act of forgiveness. And he said, but this is what was interesting about what he said. I'm going to challenge you again here. He said, I do this so that I can move on. He said, I need to forgive him in order for me to move on. He said, I don't really care about his situation and what he's dealing with himself, right? I am doing this so that I can forgive, so that I can move on. And so the point that I take from that is that, and this is the hardest thing I'm going to ask you to do, in order to move on and to have true reconciliation, the person who's been harmed has to forgive the person who's committed the harm. That's the only way it works. Right now, some of you are like, oh, okay, now you've gone too far. You have got to forgive, and the only way you move forward is to forgive. And that's what they were doing. That's the act that they were doing. And again, he said, I don't know what his situation is or what he's going through. I'm not here for him. I'm here for me. Because I need to forgive, and this is how I do it. Really, really powerful. In this country, we have been a part of processes around reconciliation in a number of other countries. I could name them. I think you could name them too. South Africa was one of them. Germany was another one. And there are others that we could name. Japan, another one. What's interesting, though, is that we have things that we need to go through reconciliation in this country for. And every time we attempt it, we quit when it gets difficult. Every time we attempt it, we quit when it gets difficult. So sometimes when I do these talks with groups, they leave and people ask me, what can I do, what can I do, what can I do? Guess what? What you just did for 20 minutes was an act of reconciliation. You just did it. So the idea that, well, how can I help, what can I do? You just did it. Reconciliation, one of the things it requires is for you to listen to the other person, to hear the other person, right? And reconciliation is intertwined with belonging, right? So how do you create psychological safety, belonging, and cross difference? Recognizing the humanity and dignity of individuals. And that's what you did when you listened. When you did identity, when we did that little exercise, that's what you were doing. You were listening and recognizing the humanity of another person. You heard their story. It was the storytelling that took place today that drove that. Acknowledgement of the impact of harm on individuals' communities, right? We talked about that impact versus intent. Platforms to share voice for storytelling. We had 2 of those that we did, right? You told your stories as you answered those questions. And then lastly, we didn't talk as much about this, but what is needed to prevent the harm from occurring again? Right? What's needed to prevent the harm? There's got to be acknowledgement of that, and action has to be taken. And it's not perfect, but if I've been harmed, I need to know that the community that I'm a part of, that I'm trying to belong to, is going to take action to ensure that that doesn't happen to me again. Otherwise, I'm not going to stay. Like, why would I let you all hurt me, and then you say you're sorry, but you have to say what you're going to do different, and I'm going to come back? No, I'm not. I'm going to join another speakers association. I get that. So that's really our goal. What we want to have happen is those actions are very important. All right? I want to thank you all for your time and your commitment. You were outstanding. You were fun. And I really hope that I gave you some things that you can think through. Your awareness is improved, and you got some tools maybe that you can use as you go through some of your topics. I've heard some of the topics that you all have, really, really important topics. So I wish you the best in your endeavors going forward. Thank you for having me.